Welcome to Peace Now. My name is Trudy Quaife. I'm a member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. We're a local organization of friends and neighbors, and we've been advocating for peace and justice for well over a decade. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by Susan Weber and Susan DuBois.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome, and thank you both for being here. Both Susan Weber and Sue DuBois are local activists, and today they're going to talk with us about the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. So we're going to start with a little background. Could you each just explain a little bit about your background and why you chose to work to oppose the TPP?
All right. Well, I've been a political person since I was in high school, and I really care about political theory, and have been involved with the women's movement, with the Civil Liberties Union, and other organizations over the years. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership has really energized me because it is so scary. It is so horrifying and is so contrary to democratic principles. So I had to get involved to try to stop it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Thank you. Sue?
I've been involved in political and advocacy things for a long time also, a lot of it in the peace movement, also in the labor movement, and those two things I think intersect with respect to opposing the TPP. I was involved in a lot of efforts against sweatshops and looking at some of the impacts of the North American Free Trade Agreement and things of that nature going back quite a few years now. And when the TPP came along, it was basically more of the same, only worse. Mm-hmm. And I actually debated about whether I really wanted to get involved because the past couple of efforts of stopping bad trade agreements have not been successful. But I got involved, and I've been involved for quite a while now on this. So it's a major struggle that I think a lot of people in the public don't know about because the mainstream press has done a really poor job of reporting on it. Mm-hmm. See very, very little about the TPP and virtually nothing about some of the other trade agreements like the one with Europe and so forth in the mainstream media.
Could you talk a little bit about what the TPP is and where it stands now?
Yeah, the TPP is a trade agreement in the style of the North American Free Trade Agreement, only bigger, and people refer to it as NAFTA on steroids. And it would involve the countries that are involved in NAFTA plus 9 others, and would take within its scope a very large proportion of the world economy. It's a trade agreement, in quotes, because it deals with traditional trade issues like import quotas and things like that, tariffs, but it also deals with a vast array of other things, even more so than the traditional trade issues. Things that normally would be under the purview of the Congress and the U.S. laws passed in a normal manner are basically turned over to the trade agreement to a large extent. The TPP countries are the United States, Canada, and Mexico, which are also the countries involved in NAFTA, plus Peru and Chile, and then in the Asian side of the Pacific, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Brunei, Australia, and New Zealand. So it involves a really diverse range of countries with totally different governmental systems, totally different economies, and incompatible, I feel, countries for having an agreement that has that type of far-ranging effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's people have estimated it's 40% of the world's economy will be subsumed by this agreement. And that's only the beginning because it's a docking agreement, which means other countries such as China or Brazil, the Philippines, can hook onto it. They can approve it themselves and join without any say-so on the United States part, for example.
What will be the effect on workers? Workers in the U.S., for example. How would TPP affect U.S. workers?
If you look at the effects of NAFTA and figure this would have same effects, only maybe bigger, it would result in the loss of jobs. And the spin-off from that in terms of if a factory closes, the the restaurant and the dry cleaner and the gas station and so forth that were near that also are impacted by the loss of a major employer. The North American Free Trade Agreement caused a large documented number of job losses, and that's only the ones that have been officially documented as directly lost to trade. I think the number is 700,000.
And yes, 61,000 factories in the United States closed as a result directly of NAFTA. And we do have manufacturing left in this country right now, but with the TPP, that will be significantly affected.
Yeah, and the decision to have China join the World Trade Organization resulted in an even larger number of job losses in the United States than NAFTA did. So these trade agreements have a history of causing job losses in the United States.
What happens is the trade agreements make it very easy for corporations to go overseas, and they make it easier for products manufactured overseas with very low wage workers, with very few environmental costs to the manufacturer, to be sent here and sold for cheap. Manufacturing in our country that has to follow environmental standards, regulatory reviews, that have to conform with labor laws, for example, and pay a living wage sometimes, are at a disadvantage.
And the existence of these trade agreements and the possibility of a company moving from the United States to Mexico or from the United States to China also makes it easier for the companies to put pressure on their workers to accept lower wages and poorer working conditions and so forth. And this has been documented going back a long time. Kate Bronfenbrenner at the Cornell School of Industrial and Labor Relations did a study on it back in the 90s about how companies were using the threat of moving to Mexico to undercut the bargaining power of their workers. So even if someone doesn't lose their job, their pay may still be brought down by this, and their ability to stand up for their own interests is compromised.
And this has farther reaching effects too, such as if people can't afford their pay is reduced, their benefits are reduced, maybe they need to go on food stamps, maybe they need to go on Medicare or Medicaid, and that puts pressure on the public fisc, on the taxpayers, and then it's just a never-ending rolling disaster for our communities. Another aspect of it is that you may think, well, it's great, then some poor worker in Vietnam will have a job and earn some money. Well, maybe today, but tomorrow these jobs may go to the Philippines where they have slave labor, or Malaysia where they have slave labor. And so it's a total race to the bottom.
I think that's a good way to put it. So there's no guarantee that these foreign workers will make a living wage or have any health care benefits or any job security.
If you look at what's happening in Mexico, the Mexican workers are very upset about NAFTA and the impacts that it's had, because they're not being paid well. And again, this goes back into the 90s, and actually they saw it coming sooner than we did, because the Zapatista uprising in Mexico, a lot of what triggered that had to do with NAFTA coming in. It wasn't the sole thing, but that was kind of the timing of it, I think, was affected by that. And in Mexico, again, going beyond just the trade and quotas, the traditional trade side of it, when Mexico came into NAFTA, they were required to do some things with regard to their land ownership system and so forth. In addition to opening the trade, and the combination of those things has really devastated the rural economy in Mexico. There was a woman who spoke about this in the Capital District a number of years ago, and she described her hometown as being a ghost town anymore.
Well, something similar to that has happened here already with the labeling, country of origin labeling on meats. We've had to change our regulations already because of, what was it, the WTO?
Yeah, the World Trade Organization.
Yeah, the World Trade Organization prohibits country of origin labeling on products. So we in our country had wonderful labeling. We knew where our beef came from, we knew where our chicken came from, and we knew where our fish came from. Now we're going to be subjected to possibly buying fish that's been farmed in Vietnam, where they feed the fish human poop. Is this a good thing? No. I'd rather know where my stuff is coming from.
Yeah, so that was in response to a challenge from other countries who challenged they call it the country of origin labeling as being a barrier to trade, or something was, I forget which exact category that was under, but something that was prohibited by the trade agreement, and the World Trade Organization tribunal said, yes, it is. United States, you're going to have to change it, or else face trade sanctions.
So that was going to be my next question, which you've already started to answer, is how is TPP going to affect the consumer? It's not necessarily in our benefit either, is it?
Yeah, it's something that has potential for undercutting a lot of consumer protection laws, environmental laws, health and safety standards, and so forth, because of a provision called the Investor State Dispute Settlement Process, or ISDS, which is basically a term for companies, in the case of the TPP, being able to sue nations when they feel that the nation's laws don't meet up to some minimum standard of treatment or otherwise violate the Trans-Pacific Partnership. For example, by having a buy local requirement or something like that may be ruled out in the terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the Investor State Dispute Settlement Process has been around for a while. There is one under NAFTA, but the one under the TPP, for one thing, would be expanded to different subject areas, like it would allow challenges like this against financial regulation. The other thing is that the TPP includes countries that are more powerful economically, specifically Japan, and a lot of Japanese companies would be in the position of being able to sue countries to challenge their laws.
You know, I'd like to follow on that and make it more clear and simple.
Okay.
I want to make it, here's the way it would work. And this is an example of what happened in Uruguay. Uruguay is a little tiny country in South America. They're very poor, but they were concerned about the health of their people harmed by smoking. And so they enacted smoking rules and regulations and packaging requirements to encourage people not to smoke, highlight the dangers of smoking. And they were sued by Philip Morris. Philip Morris, giant tobacco giant, sued poor little Uruguay for trying to protect health and safety of their people. And you know what? Michael Bloomberg came in and is financing Uruguay's defense of this law. So that's the kind of thing that can happen all over. And companies, as I understand it, are now positioning themselves to be able to challenge our health and safety laws based on the possibility of lost profits. So here's what happens. If Philip Morris sues our country for having regulations, that get in the way of their profit making from their cigarettes, we have a choice. Our country can either get rid of those laws and let Philip Morris run rampant. Philip Morris is just an example. It's not okay. Or we can pay the lost profits going forward. Okay, so who pays that money? The taxpayers, the consumers. We are toast.
So I guess we know who's going to benefit from TPP.
Oh, yeah.
The big multinational corporations, who had a major role in writing it, by the way.
I'll say, while it was being negotiated for these 5 or 6 years in secret, when even our legislators, Congress couldn't even find out what was going on, 500 or 600 corporate trade reps were advising the countries on this amazing piece of scariness.
So let's talk about that. Why was it negotiated in secret for 5 years? So were our own lawmakers able to see it? Who could see it during that 5 years of negotiation? And where do we stand now? Can the
Yeah.
average person read the bill now?
You can now. And it's really not a bill, it's a multinational agreement.
Okay.
It's on the U.S. Trade Representative's website, along with a lot of flowery prose about what a great thing it is, but the actual text is at each section has this flowery prose and then the actual text, so you can go and read it.
It's 6,000 pages.
Yeah,
Wow.
You may
with
not
all the
wanna read it.
appendices and annexes and so forth that are on it. But it was kept very secret. It was treated as classified information. And at one point, members of Congress were under severe restrictions if they wanted to even see the thing. They had to go to a room where they could not take notes. They couldn't bring their assistants with them or anything like that. It was treated with great secrecy. And after the countries came to an agreement back in, I believe, October of 2015, last year, roughly 30 days after that, the text was finally made public. So someone can see it now, but during the whole time it was being discussed and worked on and so forth, it was kept secret even from, to a large extent, even from Congress.
And you asked, why was this? Elizabeth Warren said she was told by a trade rep that it was kept secret because if the people found out about it, they would fight and would never let it happen.
So we've got about 12 minutes left. So let's talk about where we stand with the bill now, or the agreement.
agreement.
Yeah.
The agreement. I keep calling it a bill.
Well, actually, a bill is the next thing.
Is the next thing. Okay,
Well,
so describe that. What's that about?
Well,
You have one of yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just say that the thing that happened last year was that the agreement was Congress agreed to fast track the bill,
Okay.
which meant that it would come before Congress when the president sent it, but the Congress could have only a very limited time to debate it, and there could be no changes. Congress could only vote yes or no. That was we fought that, we tried to win that, we lost that.
Narrowly, but lost.
Now what has to happen is the president will send the bill, the agreement, back to Congress when he thinks he has enough votes. And so far, he has not had enough votes because there has been a lot of opposition and it's growing every day. But here's the scary part. The lame duck. Susan, talk about the lame duck.
Obama could have sent it, I think, any time since about February when the country's actually signed off on it, but he's held off. Partly because this is an election year, and a lot of the legislators are facing re-election, and they don't want to come out for something that's unpopular prior to the election. But once the election's over, some of them are going to be retiring, some of them may have lost their election and have nothing left to lose. Some of them will look at it and say, it's going to be 2 years before I'm up for election again. Everybody will have forgotten about this by that point. So the lame duck session between the election and the end of the year is the most dangerous time for bad legislation to get passed, because it's the time when the senators and members of the House are least accountable to their constituents. And the concern is that President Obama will introduce the bill in the lame duck session and put heavy pressure on the members of Congress and try to get it through during that time. And we're recording this in the beginning of November, so we don't know who's going to win the presidential election.
Right.
We don't know who's going to be controlling the Congress in 2017 yet. And but I anticipate that this is going to be a big issue in November and December of this year. And if it doesn't get resolved or passed or defeated in the lame duck session, it may come back in some form in 2017. So what would happen is that for Obama to send it to Congress, that would involve him sending implementing legislation that would make all the changes in U.S. law that are needed in order for the U.S. to be complying with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So it's going to be a big, complicated bill. And nobody knows for sure yet whether he's going to send it, but the expectation is he will probably do it, and everyone's getting ready to oppose it on that basis.
So he seems to be supportive of the bill at this point.
Very much so.
Oh, he's been pushing it like crazy. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a young man. He's going to have a long period of time ahead of him to live in this world. He has young children coming along and he wants to take care of. And I'm sorry to say this, but I would imagine he will be amply rewarded when this is all over and if the TPP becomes law. Sorry, but
Yeah,
No.
it's inconsistent with the types of things he said both as a candidate and the things you would expect him to be doing if he wants to keep his political base happy. The environmental movement is against it. The labor movement is against it. A lot of people who are advocates for better health care are against it. And, it just is inexplicable as to why he's supporting it. It also is something that would really contradict what he supposedly wants as part of his administration's accomplishment, which is things on climate, because this would very much undercut the ability to deal with some of the fossil fuel industry things that are driving climate change.
yes, there's no mention of climate change in the bill. It's silent, and it's as if it's not important, as if it's not out there threatening the planet.
And
It's
the
amazing.
ISDS, for multiple reasons, creates situations where it would be more difficult to enact the kind of laws you'd need to both control climate change and to have a good transition over to non-fossil fuel sources of energy.
For sure.
Well, what about the two major presidential candidates? Where do they stand on TPP?
Well, Trump says he's against the TPP and other trade deals that have sent our jobs overseas, but I would not count on that given his history of
Yeah,
veracity, credibility, whatever.
flip-flopping, etc.
Yeah, and Hillary Clinton says she's now opposing the TPP, but we don't know. I think she's more likely to oppose it than he is. I think Gary Johnson is in favor of it, and I do not know about Jill Stein. I think she's opposed
She's opposed to it.
Yeah.
She's opposed to
Yeah.
it.
Bernie Sanders was the one who really drove a lot of the discussion on this, and I think he's the one who pushed Hillary Clinton to finally come out against it, because he was strongly against the TPP.
And of our local reps, is that okay? Shall
Sure.
I? All right. Chuck Schumer has come out publicly against it. Kirsten Gillibrand has not taken a public position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it would be a wonderful thing if she would. And we don't know why she hasn't. She should. Chris Gibson has come out opposing the TPP. So has Paul Tonko, who has been a very, very strong fighter against the
Strongly
TPP
against
and a leader in Congress against it. Mike Derrick up north is strongly opposing it, as is Matt Funicello. Elise Stefanik voted for fast track, and we're not exactly sure where she would be on this.
She
Who
said
else?
she said after some close questioning from a reporter that she would vote no if it came up in the lame duck. But that's I think about all she said on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, Zephyr Teachout is strongly opposing it, and John Faso, both who is a Republican, is in favor of it. And these are people who are running for Gibson's seat that he's retiring from.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, so let's talk about what people can do to get more involved. How can people first find out more about this issue? You said they read the agreement, or are there websites they can go to? Are there publications they should read? How can people?
Yeah, there's two websites that have different kinds of information, really. There's one that has a lot of topical information about recent events and actions that are being done to oppose the TPP and so forth, and that's flushthetpp.org, which
Okay.
is a project of Popular Resistance, the group Popular Resistance, and the website's www.flushthetpp.org. There's another website which has more of the detailed information, but it's also got a lot of things that are sort of general summaries, which is the Trade Watch website, which is part of Public Citizen, and that you can get to by www.tradewatch.org. Both of those have a lot of information on them, and are good sources of information.
And look for anything that Lori Wallach has written.
Yeah.
She is from Citizens Trade Watch, and she's a wonderful academic studier of this whole issue for years, if there is such a thing as an academic studier. But anyway, she's
book on Fast Track, yeah.
Yeah, she's wonderful. She is marvelous. So, and you could just Google the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and all kinds of information will come up, including some pro-TPP stuff that's put out by believers like the what am I thinking of?
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, right.
For information about what's going on locally in terms of actions and events and so forth, one of the big actions that people can do anytime, from now until the end of the year and possibly into next year, depending on how this thing goes, is just keep calling your member of Congress. And if they're against it, thank them. If they're, undecided or won't say, keep after them to get them to oppose it. For other things like rallies and so forth, someone could call me if they wanted to, and I could give my number if that's appropriate.
Well, if you want to, sure.
Sure, yeah, it's 518-465-9646. They could also call the Capital District Area Labor Federation, because the Capital District Area Labor Federation, which is the umbrella group for unions in the larger Capital District, has set up a committee that Susan and I have both been on for a while now, that's working actively to oppose the TPP. And that's a source of info, too.
You could get these wonderful little postcards at Popular Resistance Flush the TPP site. And on the back, there's lots of information about the TPP. And you could talk it up. Talk to your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, because honestly, people don't know about this. And when people hear the facts about the ISDS, they are freaking, because it is so un-American, undemocratic. A legislator I know said to me, Susan, if the TPP passes, there's no reason to have legislators. We are over with. It's over. It's over.
Well, we've only got 2 minutes left here. Do either of you have any final comments on what you'd like people to remember about the TPP? And one other thing is, do you really think it matters if people call their legislators? Do you think it makes a difference if people call the president? What do you think about that?
I think that legislators, by and large, want to gain re-election. They want to please their constituents who vote. They are also very beholden to big money in politics, because that's how they get themselves out there. So one hopes that they still care about what the voters think.
I'd also add that if someone wanted to do something besides phoning their legislator, writing a letter to their legislator
Good idea.
carries more weight, I've heard, than a phone call.
Or to the
And
papers, too.
Getting together like 2 or 3 people from an organization you're involved in, whether that's an environmental organization or a, some other
Church
type of
group.
organization, church group, your union,
Okay.
and asking to meet with the legislator or their staff. That gets even more attention than a letter. So there's other ways of approaching legislator beyond the phone calls. I've been suggesting phone calls because it's easy to do and a lot of people can do it. But if you want to carry it farther, letters and meetings are an
Okay.
additional way of getting attention.
Well, I want
Another one is letters to the editor, which is very good.
Another great idea.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for joining me today, Susan Weber and Sue DuBois. Thank you so much for being here. We've learned so much about TPP. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. Please join us next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.